I was going to start off this video by talking about one of the criticisms that I'd heard about this channel, but then I took a step back for a moment and realized this is not a criticism that I've heard from other people, but rather inside, from my own head. My brain is kind of loud sometimes. Anyway, I don't always love the historical focus of this channel. This channel is about transgender history in the period known as classical antiquity, which is the ancient Mediterranean from around the 8th century BCE and the period leading up to it, up to the 5th century CE and the period after it. And there are a couple of different reasons for that historical focus. When I did my undergraduate degree, I earned my Bachelor of Arts with an honors specialization in classical studies. I feel like I need to put a monocle on when I'm doing that one. And that focused on the Greeks and the Romans. History, literature, art history, archaeology, anthropology, numismatics, the Latin language. It goes on and on. There's plenty. I spent 4 years of my life packing my brain full of this stuff. Sometimes we went earlier into the archaic era, and sometimes we went later into the Byzantine era, but it was always a way to tie it back to the classical era. And this channel's subject matter reflects that. Each of these videos can sometimes take hundreds of hours to research and compile and write. And that's not including all the time I take to shoot the video and then reshoot the video because I've screwed up at some point, and then edit it, and then have to reshoot parts of it again because I don't know what I'm doing as far as making videos goes. It takes a lot of time. And that is with subjects that I already have a pretty strong familiarity with. I don't have that familiarity with Chinese history, for example. So it's much more difficult for me to do that sort of research. An already Herculean task becomes even more so. I started this channel on the belief that we deserve to know and own our own histories. And these are my own histories, at least to a certain extent, because I live in Canada, but ethnically I'm Sicilian, so I feel more of a closer kinship with Roman history, for example, than I would with Chinese history. But if I'm focused on empowering our community, on lifting us up, on helping us understand our own histories, it's important for me to stay in my lane when it comes to my research. In other words, I'm pretty sure that people who don't look like me have had enough of people who look like me telling their own histories for them. But those stories still deserve to be told. If your ancestry comes from somewhere other than the ancient Mediterranean, you still have a wealth of cultural history that deserves to be known and told. I'm sure that's the case. I haven't done the research, but I'm sure it's the case. Your cultural history is just as important as mine or anybody else's. Just because I'm not the right person to tell that history doesn't mean that history doesn't deserve to be known. It absolutely does. Which brings me to the title of this video, A Humble Request. Are you out there doing transhistorical research on an era other than the classical Mediterranean? If so, let's talk. I'd love to know more of your research, and I'm sure the people who watch these videos would also love to know more about your research. I'd love to feature you on this channel and boost what you're doing. I've asked this on my various socials over the years, and I've never really gotten a response, but I know you're out there. You gotta be out there. I know you are. But whenever I search transgender history on YouTube, all I get are, my own videos, and that's great, or I get well-meaning progressives talking about maybe a one-off video on trans history, or a bunch of fascist garbage. And, that neither of those is great, the fash stuff for obvious reasons. But each of the topics that I dig into has a deep, rich, nuanced history. And we deserve more than to be listed off as though we're items in a catalog. I'm not talking down to any of the allies out there who have done videos on trans history. I'm grateful for your work. I appreciate it. All I'm saying is we deserve more, and I think you would agree. I'm sure the rest of the world has just as much of a rich, deep, nuanced transgender history as the classical Mediterranean does. But I haven't done the research, and quite frankly, I don't plan to. But if you've done the research, let's talk. There's an email address in the description of this channel, and I'll probably include it in the description of the video here as well. Get in touch with me. Let's talk. Your research doesn't have to be outside the Mediterranean. If you're doing early modern research, for example, or medieval research, that's great. I'd love to see that. It doesn't have to be ancient either. If you're doing medieval Chinese history, for example, does China even have a medieval era? I don't know. See, this is why I don't want to do the research, because there's so much I don't know, and it would take me so much to do it. And this is not my full-time job, at least not yet. I'd love for it to be. I'd love to be a full-time YouTuber, just teaching people history all day. That would be awesome. But I'm not there yet. This is a fairly small channel. I don't have huge influence, but I'd like to use what influence I do have in a constructive way. So if you've done some research on transgender history that falls outside of this channel's scope, get in touch with me. Let's chat. Let's do an interview. Let's have a conversation. Let's see how we can share your research in a way that boosts your signal. So it's not just me self-aggrandizing here, that boosts your signal, but also helps people who don't look like me to understand where their history comes from as well. We deserve to know and to own our own histories. And if you believe that, as I do, and you know some transgender history, let's talk. Send me an email.